Hello everyone and welcome to His Author's Voice. I am the author, Jack Sanger. This podcast is another of the occasional series under the heading I Could Have Been a Shaman, and investigates what kinds of experience one can undergo either through meditation, accident, or drug enhancement that can lead to the sense that this reality that we live in now is not the only one. After all, shamans are famous for their capacity to move beyond current reality and into other realms. I hope you enjoy it. I could have been a shaman. Keys to the doors of perception. So far, in my excursions into shamanic patterns in my biography, I have focused on flesh and blood events. But most of us have other kinds of experience which seem spooky or otherworldly, which arrive either uninvited or with some intent into our consciousness. They confirm the suspicion that what we see around us is somehow conditioned and that there is much more beyond. Those seekers who travel to far-off places to have supernatural experiences are certain of it. The rise in natural hallucinogenic substances drawn from nature in every place in the world are shortcuts to the long and rigorous process of meditation in a Buddhist retreat. Let's look at the uninvited, for starters. Daydreams. Not the kind which are part of some desire for wish fulfillment, but the sort that jump into your mind unannounced from somewhere else, some other sphere of existence, a parallel universe, a ghostly past, who knows? You're aware of them and try to focus, but they flee your mind before you can pin them down. I've had these off and on all my life. They contain people and events, often with cinemascopic brightness, part of some seeming narrative, which some part of my brain becomes immersed in. From hours and hours of them, I have nothing really to show, except raggedy bits of images like torn frames of film floating in the air after momentous screening. This kind of experience so plagued me that I wrote a disturbing novella based on it called Through a Mirror Clear. You can find it on my website at www.jacksanger.com. Now, then there is the experience wherein you purposefully invite visions to enter your mind, either through rigorous meditation or through psychedelic enhancement. The former has not proved a consistently valuable avenue to me, but the latter has had its moments. I first had a truly meditative experience aged around 6 or 7 years old. I have tried to capture it in the following poem. The Lilac Tree. One day when I was 6 or 7 and doubted there might be a heaven, a place with angels and a bearded God, who ruled the earth with his lightning rod. Well, on that day I had to pee, and Mrs. Drummond let me be, so out I went into the yard where urinals waited, yellow-tarred by years of bursting childhood wee. From nose-held careless infancy I did my bit to add more stain with my little spray of acid rain. Then, just as I had started back, I stopped mid-step on my usual tack. A rush of colour caught my gaze, The playground was a purple haze. It enticed me up the tree with its bursting tower of dripping pendules of lilac flower. I found myself a place to perch high inside its pagan church, and fell into a reverie, a drug-enhanced cacophony of flies and beetles, stripy bees, murmuring on the violet seas, and there I dozed until the bell, which let my schoolmates out as well. Some climbed too, so they could be co-celebrants in the sorcery. By telepathy we shared a prayer to an ancient one we sensed was there. That childhood spell still wraps my skin and stops life trying to shut me in. From the lilac tree I still derive my sense of truly being alive. Since this first experience, I've had flashes of extrasensory awareness of the wonders of existence, where objects from the mundane, a brass cigarette lighter that I seem to be able to levitate, to the sublime, and out of the body oneness with raindrops, countryside, clouds and sun. They are magical manifestations of some kind of otherworldliness. Objects and events seem to have taken on a super-reality. All my senses enhanced at the same time. Well, the second purposeful immersion in this other realm has involved drugs. Before continuing, and in an effort to get you to stop reaching for the escape key because you were alarmed at the bad press regarding drug taking, let me point you to a Netflix miniseries called How to Change Your Mind. In it, 4 drugs are taken, 1 in each episode, by people under medical supervision. LSD, ecstasy, psilocybin, and mescaline. They represent rigorous medical experiments on how to solve chronic mental health issues, some of which have lasted 20 or 30 years, involving just 1 or 2 trips. Absolutely extraordinary and wonderful to see. An end to pointless big pharma drugs that have been slowly destroying patients' minds and their innards. I took drugs, a very limited set of times, to try to resolve a condition I've suffered from all my life. It's a weird one, and I refer to it in the first of this Shaman series. I have no memory of the first 4 years of my life, during which I was born and lived in India and spoke good Urdu. I hoped that a hallucinogenic trip might resolve this issue and give me my memory back, an inkling of what I felt like, who I was in those early years. I have to say that LSD gave me fodder for thought about how the brain is a repository for the extraordinary confirmation that there are dimensions of existence beyond the everyday, as can also happen with meditation. It can be a bit hairy and exotic, but I didn't find it personally revelatory. And ecstasy did nothing at all for me. But mescaline, now there is a drug to conjure with. It was difficult to get hold of in the late 60s. Despite Aldous Huxley's fine introduction to its effects and consequences for our notions of reality in The Doors of Perception, I only had 1 trip. I moulded it into Through a Mirror Clear, my novella mentioned above. Here's an extract. He had done something similar to this once before, when a Brazilian writer, a kind of Borges crossed with Marquez, who wrote short stories like Rapier Thrust dripping with blood, turned up and brought with him some mescaline. All he remembered was that they went to a Hampstead soiree in honour of this Brazilian writer in a state of euphoric frankness, holding on to each other like lovers, eliciting strange looks and expressions of hurt as they cut a sway through the cocktail glasses. He was able to divine what people were thinking at the same time as he heard what they were saying. It was not long before he began to parrot variations on the question, "Why did you say that when you were thinking this?" Then he had had to lie down for a couple of hours, imbibing 1,000 milligram vitamin C tablets every 5 minutes to bring him to something approaching sanity. I had exactly this experience. I was with a group of friends and heard clearly what each one was thinking, often in contrast to what they were actually saying. I seemed to float above the group with a kind of omnipotent understanding of each living being below me. It led me to the conclusion that we can all be shamans by taking a guided trip into our psyches, using a measured hallucinogen with professional or experienced support. We can be like the subjects of those Native American shamans who provide guided succor using peyote in their religious ceremonies. It is a grim note that the Spanish, bringing their Catholic faith to South America, and the invading European North American Christians punished or executed drug-taking priests of native religions because in their ceremonies their subjects were encouraged to talk to God one-to-one. Now this was a role exclusively for nuns, monks or priests of Christian churches. They could be the sole mediators and guardians of channels to God. And it could not be an individual and personal experience at all. It had to be a congregational ritual through hymn and prayer. That's why, as a rule, Western religions contain no shamans, and otherworldly experiences are quite rare in churches. When Richard Nixon declared a war on drugs, he put back the solution to so much mental suffering by 20 or 30 years. It is only now that psychoanalysts and therapists are able to offer hope to their patients as they gain licenses for drug-based therapy. It is tantalizing, is it not, to think that the natural world contains keys to our doors of perception, and governments try to stamp down on their use. Why? Because they want their populations to be servile, obedient, and conditioned to one almost monochrome reality. Each of us can become his or her own shaman. All it requires is a supportive and protective environment. Well, there we are. Another in the Shaman series. It's funny, when I first started to record my experiences under the heading I Could Have Been a Shaman, I didn't imagine that there would be more than 3 or 4 at the outset. Who knows how many there will be in the end. Anyway, if you enjoyed it, you can listen to the others if you haven't heard them, or you can listen to the short stories and extracts from novels that are also on this podcast site and on YouTube under the heading His Author's Voice, podcasts by Jack Sanger. Or you can actually read my novels, plays, short stories, poetry and Zen nonfiction at www.jacksanger.com. Thank you very much for listening. Please encourage your friends to go to the sites, and I'll be with you soon with another short story. Bye for now. Bye-bye.